Hello, everyone. I am John O'Loughlin, and welcome to McDuff Lives. This is Friday, so it's Friday chat. If anyone wants to raise a question with us here at McDuff Lives, give us a little note on the chat room. If not, I'm just going to speak freely and talk about what's been on my mind lately. Very serious times right now. We have Mr. Zelensky, the president of a major European country, Ukraine, calling upon NATO and the United States to actually launch a first strike nuclear attack on Russia. What do you think about that? How is it possible that all the peaceniks of my generation turned into these liberal, go along people that will just say, okay, if you got to do it, do it? How did they lose their sense of right and wrong? How did they lose their consciences? And it really does go back in my mind to that statement that I've been quoting this week by Charles de Gaulle after the assassination of President Kennedy. And President de Gaulle said, uh, they won't reveal it. They will band together. They will keep silent. They will not investigate the death of President Kennedy. Why? Because they're all wedded to the narrative. Wedded to the narrative. I think that's the topic for this morning, unless you guys have something else. What is it like to step outside of the narrative? Most people don't want to. Most people would much rather just continue believing that, you know, the President of the United States knows best and will do the best thing for us and for our country. Most people continue believing that Congress actually represents the people, that our institutions are actually acting in behalf of the citizens of the United States against all the evidence. And I try to present what evidence comes before me. And in my case, I think I have a pretty strong case, and that is the evidence that my father was assassinated by Alan Dulles, Richard Bissell, Frank Wisner, um, the well, I don't know about Wisner, but what I'm saying is that there was a health alteration committee in the CIA that was prepared to uh, use biological and chemical means to disable people and to kill people. And I offer my father as an example of that. Um, I think, you know, Bertrand Russell, who gets a great deal of praise for his opposition to nuclear war, by the way, is in fact one of history's most malevolent individuals. And he's the one that wrote what I made the preface to my book. And this is my book, McDuff Lives. You can get it on Amazon. And the preface to the book reads, this is Bertrand Russell's quote from his book, The Scientific Outlook. Scientific, right? Quote, on those rare occasions when a boy or girl has passed the age at which it is usual to determine social status, in other words, what class are you in, shows such marked ability as to seem the intellectual equal of the rulers. Well, I think they saw something in my dad of intellectual ability and also a muscular football player type, as well as an intellectually gifted man. Okay, so when such marked ability as to seem the intellectual equal of the rulers, in other words, they thought, geez, he might be actually as smart as us. A difficult situation will arise requiring serious consideration. If the youth is content to abandon his previous associates and to throw in his lot wholeheartedly with the rulers, He may, after suitable tests, be promoted. But if he shows any regrettable solidarity with his previous associates, the rulers will reluctantly conclude that there is nothing to be done with him except to send him to the lethal chamber before his ill disciplined intelligence has had time to spread revolt. This will be a painful duty to the rulers, but I think they will not shrink from performing it. Unquote. Bertrand Russell. That is the story of my father's life. You know, an Irish American family has a child that is a child of a divorce. He, at the age of, well, from almost from infancy, uh, between his mother and his father's parents, his mother was Margaret Coakley, his father, Thomas Francis O'Loughlin Sr., who was living at home in the home of the O'Loughlin family, an extended Irish family in Hartford, Connecticut in the 20s and 30s. And somebody noticed him and said, we can possibly use this kid. Let's put him out. Let's take him out of public school and put him into the Loomis School, the Loomis Academy, now called Loomis Chaffee, in Windsor, Connecticut, a school for grooming the Rockefeller kids, a school for preparing kids to go to the Ivy League schools. And indeed, my dad was selected to go to Harvard, got a scholarship to Harvard, and went to Harvard. Perhaps the first inclination that he might not be suitable for their purposes was when he refused football team as a result of an incident involving a broken leg or he being told that he needed to break somebody's leg. And he wouldn't do it. He would rather sit on the bench than be used as a violent actor to damage some other kid's leg that would take him out of sports forever. Did coaches want kids that would do that? I think some coaches did. I think those coaches were kind of screening and grooming the kids to find out which ones would just do whatever they were told, even if it violates most people's morals. And I think that's the story of my dad. Was he was a very, very moral man. As I read the poem, the character of the Happy Warrior by Wordsworth on the show yesterday, I think we described a man who was willing to be a warrior in order to protect all the things that he loved, but not willing to be a murderer, an assassin, a hitman for the dark forces behind our government, i.e., the banking, corporate, commercial interests that we've studied so hard. And we recognize that this is the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, the exploiters of people all around the world, the thieves of resources, and the people who commit genocide in order to acquire more wealth. Well, I see we have some comments here, so let me join the conversation. Mobsters here, Dial 221 is here, Jason Brightmore, and Miss Hunt. Well, how are you all doing this morning? A little sip of coffee. Reminds me of the days before the mute button. I was able to buy this really nice broadcast mixer. It's called a Rodecaster Pro about 2.5 years ago from the kind donations to my Patreon over at screamingospreys.com. And that's how we finance things here. We have about $360 came in last month, and we are spending about $50 to $75 a week just on keeping up with the library. Got a number of new books in. Let's see. Oh, I do want to let you know that we're going to have a special show soon with the author David Martin, whose book, The Assassination of James Forrestal, I find to be very, very important. James Forrestal was the Secretary of the Navy during World War II, and I have his signature on his letter to my father. It was a not a personal letter to him, but one of the many letters that Forrestal wrote to all the officers of the Navy after the war, thanking them for their service and telling them that they had performed a great deed on behalf of humanity. Well, let's see what you guys are thinking about. Monster says, oh, I can push this button here and bring it up to the screen. I bet Hoover was relieved your dad went to Saxon. Maybe he suggested they make the offer. It's all speculative, Monster. I I think I don't remember who it was. Somebody sent me a private note saying that they think perhaps that they moved my dad to the Pentagon in order to get him out of the way, uh, because they knew that they were going to have to get rid of President Kennedy, and they knew that my father was not going to let him do it if he could stop him. So the whole FBI cover up, you know, and it was definitely an FBI cover up, was Hoover's project in coordination with President Johnson. And I don't think President Johnson was a legitimate president of the United States, by the way. I think we have to recognize a coup d'etat occurred, not just the assassination of a president, but a coup, a substitution for the republic created by the Constitution with a kind of a fake uh, government. And that fake government operates behind the curtain, operates where we really can't see what's going on. They make the decisions, and then they use the media and the pulpit and the soapbox of political power to convince us that what they're doing is what we want. And to avoid any controversy whatsoever, they have now applied censorship. It's funny, I put up on my Facebook today a what I consider to be an important warning to people. Say, do not trust the World Health Organization. Do not trust them. And I think that's a very important message to get out. Now, it's just my opinion. I don't have inside information that tells me, in no uncertain terms that nobody should ever, ever trust them. I'm just giving my opinion. And it is that opinion that they squash. Because how could I even prove what I'm saying? I'm just giving you, this is the result of my own reasoning. But they can't allow it. They have to censor it. And so they sent me a notice saying, we're taking that down. And if you ever say any such a thing again, we're taking your entire Facebook presence away from you. And so I'm in a position of, well, I have to censor myself on Facebook now because I use Facebook to communicate with my friends and do business around my music business and otherwise, to to keep in touch with hundreds and hundreds of people. And I don't want to lose my Facebook page. So I will probably back off from telling the truth on Facebook, which is what they want. They want to have the entire field to themselves so that nobody ever hears anything except for the narrative. So to Mobster's question, I don't know about whether Hoover was relieved or not. I don't know enough about his character, but I would say that it's likely that my dad, if he had stayed at the FBI, would have seen what this FBI was capable of doing, and it would have had to raise his hand and say, "Hey, you can't do that." That's not fidelity, bravery, or integrity. That's treason, and that's what it was. It was treason. So yeah, I guess they were kind of relieved that my dad got recruited over to the Pentagon. Well, we've been talking about hepatitis this week, and boy, as soon as he accepted that position at the Pentagon, he got struck with hepatitis. And a lot of people have asked very reasonable questions, such as, um, did he have a history of eating um, shellfish in risky situations? Absolutely not. He never would have done that. Was he traveling to places where hepatitis was or is endemic? Did he go to Southeast Asia, uh, for instance? And he did go to Southeast Asia on one occasion. I think it was just to Thailand, but he might very well have gone to Saigon as well. Some of that they would have kept secret off the records. He was associated in some way with the Maxwell Taylor mission to Saigon to make an assessment on behalf of President Kennedy of whether the South Vietnamese army was winning or losing. And of course, the details of his association we're still digging into. But he became, at the Pentagon, the top of the pyramid for approving special operations. And if you understand that the special operations that the CIA was doing were illegal, were in many cases violating our Constitution, in all cases violating the rights of people in other countries, murder, assassination, genocide, bombing, you name it, and then economic warfare as well, using the institutions of the World Bank and the IMF to destroy the sovereignty of countries that are just emerging from colonialism, to keep them back, to keep the people uneducated, to keep the resources unexploited by the people and exploited by the big banking interests represented by the World Bank. So, yeah, I think Hoover was committed to covering up the Kennedy assassination. And I think he knew that he couldn't have gotten away with it if my dad were still with the FBI in the counterintelligence division, which is where he was. I do not think my dad was part of Division 5. I just want you to, if those of you that know the Division 5 and the Torbett Memorandum, I think the Torbett Memorandum was a inside job, cover up on behalf of the CIA, throwing the blame on the FBI, probably more than it deserved, but nevertheless, we do have. Uh, I'm quite sure that the people that were running Division 5, like William Sullivan, were in on it and were quite willing to cover up the assassination of a president of the United States because they thought it was their higher duty to protect, who? The clients, the Sullivan and Cromwell, the clients of that unbelievably corrupt law firm. Jason, though the stars or ceiling might fall, not trying crimes by executive office breaks under one law sentiments. Good day for all, I'm wishing. Well, thank you. Yeah, fiat justitia, ruat caelum. Let justice be done, though the heavens fall. Brightmore, how are you today? Nice guy Joe's pardoning weed crimes. Guess Joe's changed since he passed the omnibus bill to jail black people in private prisons for long bids because they smoked less crack than Hunter. I think it's a fair comment. I think, he's just pandering for votes. And, there's nothing about justice there. There's nothing about, I'm giving pardons to people for committing crimes that shouldn't have been crimes in the first place in order to just get votes. No other reason. He is desperate for votes. I'm going to make another comment. This is out of my own store of things I'd like to say someday. Well, this is one I'd like to say. Vote. Don't listen to the voices that say don't vote. Don't listen to the voices that say that your voice doesn't matter, that it's all just a shell game, the phony left against the phony right. And, don't waste your time. Don't dignify the fake process by engaging in it. No, it's a reasonable thing to think, but it's counterproductive. If you walk away from the system, then you don't have anything left. You're walking away from the Constitution. Yes, they took down the government in 1963. Yes, they've been engaging in fake governmental action ever since. Yes, they are in the process of engaging in world war. Yes, they are marching us toward another world war. Yes, they are. So what makes more sense? To just step outside of it and say, oh, that's not me. I don't have anything to do with that. Or to engage in the system. To me, I think at a certain point, voter fraud can't win. Enough people who see through the lies can make a difference. They can make the honest vote so high that it's impossible for the fraud to be successful. Plus, it gives you a voice. You get to talk about the election that's coming up. It's saying, I'm going to support this side, and here's why. Even if Dominion Voting Machines comes in and says, well, we're canceling John O'Loughlin's vote, he doesn't count. At least I have participated. At least I have made my effort. Because if I just go stand in a corner and pretend that the rest of the world is irrelevant and wrong, and there's nothing I can do about it, then who wins? Not me. I'm just a guy standing in the corner. I don't win anything that way. participate. That's my advice. There were 6 CIA agents who were involved, who were ex-FBI involved in the JFK assassination. Yes. Another thing that really needs more attention is when, before World War II, the FBI was in fact the foreign counterintelligence service for the nation in South America, in Latin America. Uh, the OSS or CIA was not allowed to run operations where the FBI was. Now, that's a resonance for me with General MacArthur not allowing the OSS into his Southwest Pacific Theater of Operations because he was running his own intelligence service. So there's a division there between the FBI, and one would tend to put MacArthur on that side, and the OSS and CIA, who are emerging after World War II as far more powerful than the FBI. And by the time Hoover dies, I think that's 70, I think it's 73, I can't remember. But by the time he dies, the FBI has already basically been subverted into a sister organization of the CIA. But that was not the case during my father's career from 1949 to 1962. I don't think that the FBI was involved in the actual murder of President Kennedy, but I think that they were involved directly and very, very blatantly in the cover up. So, yeah, by getting rid of my dad, they were able to prepare for the eventual cover up and to execute the cover up without him being there to interfere with their narrative. But what I was going to say about this, the ex FBI, was that the CIA went into South America and started recruiting guys, and they recruited a number of Hoover's agents. You remember Guy Bannister, and there's many others that had been FBI that found it more rewarding to be in the CIA, and that really did happen. Were these 6 guys screened to make sure that they would not have any moral qualms no matter what the CIA did? Yeah, I think so. Did they approach my dad maybe to see if he'd join them? They probably did, although that's speculation. Fabian Socialists, my favorite people. Yeah, did a number of shows on the Fabians. You can find them in the archives. Fabian Socialists, Wells, Russell, Shaw, and the others set the rules and parameters for the scientific development and governments of the 20th century. Yeah, yeah, that's Bertrand Russell. That's the quote that I gave you right from his book, The Scientific Outlook. Techno fascism, rule by technological means. Hoover was responsible for the security of our Nazi-infested new space agency suspected as part of the JFK hit. Yeah, I don't know about that. Yes, there were Nazis in NASA, no doubt about that. Um, I don't. You're talking about the Torbett memo and the idea that there was that this industrial security, right? You remember and I think it's called the Industrial Security. Well, anyway, it was something like an Industrial Security Administration, and the idea was that this was a kind of a secret security operation to protect NASA from foreign spies and security generally. And were those people the ones that, were involved with FBI Division 5? And that theory of the Torbett Memorandum is, yeah, they did the hit on Kennedy. And I don't believe it. I'm not saying they're innocent. I just don't think that the I don't think the FBI or this industrial security uh, group were the killers. I think the killers came from the what we call the synarchy, and the synarchists and the people involved in, the European side of the financial empire. That's just my opinion, though. I do not have the facts on that. Miss Hunt, how are you? Can we start a needs night type show? I don't know what that means. We used to have one once a month at my church. That sounds good. Oh, I know what you're saying. Like if somebody needs to talk about something or yeah, have a conversation. Well, maybe we can do that now. Anything's on your mind? Anything you want me to toss out there for further consideration? I'd be glad to do it. R.I.P. Judy. I don't think I knew Judy, but sorry for your loss there, Brightmore. They threatened to remove the titles and privileges of the nobility if they didn't conform to their plan. The little people were not to benefit from the new technologies to be developed. You know, that reminds me of Sean Ross's work on the Order of the Garter, which he shows the motto there of the Order of the Garter, which is "On ne soit qui mal y pense," which I don't pronounce correctly because it's Old French, and I don't know how to pronounce Old French. I can hardly do New French, but the sense of it is that shame on those who do not approve of what we're doing. Shame on you if you don't agree with us. Us, the Order of the Garter, representing the combination of the oligarchical families with the nobility of the British Empire. And that's an important concept. As Sean Ross explains, the nobility is part of what he calls the vertical rule. There's a king or an emperor or a queen, and that's the top of the pyramid, and everybody responds underneath of that one person. That's a vertical rule. Whereas the families, the rich families, the oligarchical families from the black nobility in northern Italy and Austria to the oligarchs of the City of London families from the Churchills and the Astors and all of the other families that got wealthy off of war and trade manipulation, opium sales, and slaving. They have the power in the City of London. And these two groups, the horizontal rule of the oligarchs, where they all work together and, work out behind the scenes what they're going to do, combined with the nobility, the imperial side of the British Empire, to work together. And that puts it fairly clear to me that the already wealthy merchant class or banking class and the already wealthy noble class have made a deal. and that deal of the garter, that we're working together, and if you don't like it, it's too bad. You're screwed. Shame on you if you don't approve of what we are doing. And Sergeant, how are you? Thanks for joining us this morning. It's always good to have your voice. It's hard growing up in a special operations family. You never really know what your dad does for a living. There are thousands of families like that here. You should be very proud of your daddy, John. I am, Sergeant. I am very proud of him, and all of those thousands and thousands of people that you just mentioned of need to be proud of their dads too. You know, loose lips sink ships. That's one of the famous sayings of the Navy, and it's true. So you have to zip it. I never knew my dad was involved in the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The reason that I use Leyte Driver as my handle on Twitter, by the way, is because I grew up on Leyte Drive. Leyte Drive is a little road in the in the very first subdivision built uh, southeast of Washington in Prince George's County, called South Lawn, named after one of the old. I can't. It's not big enough to call it a plantation, but one of the old farm mansions there called South Lawn. And I grew up there until I was about, I guess, 9 or 10 years old on that street called Leyte Drive. But I didn't know that my dad had bought a house on Leyte Drive and had not only had he been at the Battle of Leyte Gulf, but he was on the bridge of the USS Nashville with General MacArthur at that uh, iconic moment when MacArthur returns to the Philippines. You know, he had matchbooks printed that said, "I shall return," and distributed all over the Philippines. And so when he returned, it was to him, to MacArthur, and to history, one of the most poignant and important moments of World War II. And there was my dad on the bridge of that ship as MacArthur, from a small landing craft, walks through the surf onto the beach up to the microphone and says, "I have returned." Why was my dad on the bridge with General MacArthur? Why? Well, perhaps he was just the officer of the day and assigned to be looking through the binoculars at that very moment when the picture was taken. And that picture's in my book. It's also, I've published it a number of times uh, on my Twitter feed. So, and it's a U.S. Army picture. I had all the Navy pictures, but I didn't know there was an Army picture until about 5 years ago when I happened across it. And I looked at that picture and I saw, oh my God, that's my dad. That's my dad with those binoculars looking at the landing at Leyte Gulf on October 20th, 1944. And and it still gives me chills to think that I had not any idea until that moment that my dad really was a very, very important secret warrior, even in World War II. It is hard. It's terribly hard. As a matter of fact, it's completely unfair. It's a terrible thing to do to children, terrible thing to do to wives or husbands in that case. It's awful and it's un-American. I'm sorry, but this whole idea of using special ops involves Machiavellian tactics, outright lies, tricking people, betraying a trust that you have nursed and developed over years just because you are one of the special operators. You're above the law, so they tell you. But it ruins your families, it ruins your life, and it's not the American way. It's just not who we are, to use Anton Chaikin's book as a reference. Who are we? We are not the people that populate armies by night. No, we do our work in sunshine. We believe in transparency, and we also believe that when there has been dark deeds, that the remedy is sunlight. And that's what I hope to do, is to provide some light upon these dark situations so that no more families have to suffer. Good morning, Mark Husatonic Live. What a great week we've had. And special shout out to Nick for helping us dig a whole lot deeper in a very short time on this issue of um, hepatitis vaccines and cancer. Right. Yeah, I Jackie is an enigma to me. I don't I haven't studied her because I don't know what too much is to be gained. I think it's important that we recognize her connections through her father to the European deep state and that very same organizations, those organizations that would have provided the hitmen. Um, and then she is then sheltered by Onassis, one of the beneficiaries of skullduggery and, you know, making money from shipping. But those, how did he get the ships? I won't go into it, but the whole story of Jackie is one that I think is beyond me. It's an enigma that I don't think I'll ever solve. Refused to change out of her assassination outfit because she wanted to show the world what they did. I don't know what to say. I suspect that you're right, but she could have done a lot more if she really wanted to expose them. Yeah, at Saxa. Um, who's he working for? He's working directly for Krulak, and Krulak is a Marine who's well versed in all kinds of you know tricky warfare, skullduggery, and when someone said to Krulak, you need to learn how to do special operations like the CIA does. He goes like, well, we already know that. We're Marines. And I think it's true. Need to look at the involvement of RCA Marconi in the capture of the U.S. government in the minds of the American proletariat. Well, we've done an awful lot of work on that. I think, to look to David Underdown's work, David Cranmer Underdown, my colleague and guest, who is our expert on corporate connections, deep state corporate connections. David, I'm sure, will have done some work on that already, and perhaps if he notices this, he'll provide us with some leads into looking into the involvement of RCA and Marconi. Laura, you fought back with Facebook and you won. That's good. I don't think I would win mine. Mine was pretty severe. I said to everybody, do not trust the World Health Organization. I said, COVID shots are dangerous. PCR test doesn't work. A number of other things that I said that I know they will never agree with. If they did, then it's game over. Can you imagine Facebook allowing us to tell the truth about COVID? If they did, then everybody would say, oh, that makes sense. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to inject myself or my kids. No, Facebook can't do it. It'd be like, you know, one of Bertrand Russell's young people saying, well, let's give him a chance. Let's bring him in and give him that scholarship to Harvard. And then he steps out of line right away, says, you can't trust the WHO. If you can't trust the WHO, then the whole thing falls apart, doesn't it? And that's the narrative. They have to stick to the narrative. CIA is an agency of the Knights of Malta, the Templars. Well, they are certainly connected. And J. Peter Grace, W.R. Grace, these are Knights of Malta. This American branch of the Knights of Malta was created. They weren't really, in real Knights of Malta lore, you have to be a noble. You have to come from a noble family to be a Knight of Malta, because their mission was to protect the nobility. This is before the Great Compromise, which happened, I think, in the creation of the Bank of England and the BEIC. That's when Ani Soit Qui Mal Y Pense comes in, that we're now working together, and don't stray outside of our alliance. We're going to rule all the common people together. We're going to take all the resources we want. We're going to enjoy their daughters and their sons, and we're going to turn their kids into mechanics, into assassins, into robotic minded servants of the upper class. Nope. You can't step outside of the great bargain between the Royal Knights and the Freemasons. Freemasons, to me, is the collection of the non-noble privileged people who have their own justification for being among the elite, i.e., that they are illuminated, that they see past the day-to-day existence of the common people, that the common people are simply stupid. They are like cattle, and the way you control them is with pleasure or pain. They do what you want, you give them a little pleasure. Give them a pint of rum at the end of the day. British Navy. Or a half pint. Whereas if they step out of line, you beat them with a knotted cord until they turn black and blue. And that's how you keep the common people in line. You don't have to teach them anything. You don't have to explain things to them. You just tell them what to do. And if they do it, reward them. If they don't do it, you know what to do. Uh-oh. Sergeant Stadenko. Wake and bake. All right. See now, where's the harm in that? It's Sergeant Stadenko is not hurting anybody. And Doug Valentine, the great author, has a post on Twitter today, which I recommend to you. He talks about his personal experience um, dealing with a number of personal health problems, including arthritis and the pain, and how he went through the process of seeing a doctor and getting a diagnosis and a prescription, and you know, having to find his way to actually find something consumable. And his essay, written in 2016, is a plea for legalization, not because it's good to let people go out and have fun and get crazy and get the munchies, but because it has medicinal effects. And that's medicine, you know? Drugs are medicine, you know? People call it an herb. Well, it's a psychoactive herb, but it is an herb. It was natural and organic. Now it's created different strains, sophisticated labs. But the medicinal effect of it is ignored by the law, and it's not right. We should have, well, I think it should just they should just forget about legislation about marijuana. I think they should just forget about it. And but at least, acknowledge that it has medical uses and let people just let people take care of themselves. Media narrative is softening. Well, like I said at the top of the show, Joe Biden just trying to get some votes. Vote for the lesser of two evils in a sacred democracy. I disagree. Yeah, I don't know of any sacred democracies. But I do know that we do have a constitution, and I do know that we have voting laws, and I do know that if you ignore them, then you've taken yourself out of the game. You're no longer a participant, except for, if you want to consider, pulling down the last vestiges of our republic, participation, because that's what you do. If you just withdraw, you might as well take a hand in pulling it all down. That's my opinion. You're free to disagree, but no, I'm not giving up. I can't give up because there's no alternative. What's the alternative? Be a communist? No, thank you. Be a royalist? No, thank you. Join the empire? No way. There's no alternative. We've got to persevere with what we've got and make it better, make it what it should be. Two-party system is one layer, one which is a printing system of really merchants or a Russian sort of unlimited money for things like insemination experiments, storytellers distract, and pushing opinion. Yeah, well, I can't disagree with that. Declassified, but nothing is a secret on the planet. Russia and America were always allies. It's like a group and a subgroup. Okay, well, as I say, we disagree on that. Tim McVeigh, absolutely. What an interesting story. And again, it's covered up. The media doesn't investigate. But yeah, look into Tim McVeigh. Look into his association with the 10th Mountain Division, for instance. Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Mars, a book I read cover to cover on my show about 2 years ago and recommended to everyone. Oswald Spengler. Wow. Well, is there a difference between techno-fascism and technocracy? That's a good question. I think both of them are evil because they take the spirit, the mind, the heart, the soul out of people and turn us into those robots that you know, join the Borg. I don't think either one is good, techno-fascism or technocracy. Both are bad in my book. Ah, Professor Hamamoto, let's take a question. John, do you think the death crash of JFK Jr. is linked to his interest in revisiting? Yeah, yeah, I do. They have to kill the sons because like me, they've tried to kill me, by the way. Um, it's a story I've saved for another day, and perhaps I'll open that up soon. But they had to get rid of JFK Jr. and all that Q stuff, with the nephews and grandkids, singing this stupid song and all that. That was all just showing how powerful they are, that they can control these Kennedy kids. And then that one that died in the Chesapeake Bay, just disappeared. 2 years ago, was it? If you don't go along with the narrative, they will get rid of you. So, in my case, they've tried, and they'll probably try again. Absolutely. Yeah. You see, this is something they can't deny is it's a biological fact that I will not rest until the killers of my dad are brought to justice. That is a biological fact, my friends. All right, I'm going to leave it there today. Everyone have a great weekend. I will not be on the show tonight, so I'll see you next on Monday. Looking forward to Monday and on Tuesday. Um, we're going to have Anton Chaikin back to have another discussion with him of his book, Who We Are, his prior book, Treason in America, and a number of fascinating essays of Anton Chaikin's that you can always look at larouchepub.com in the EIR archive. So, as far as research, it's been a great week. I'm very grateful to everyone for their contributions and thoughts and support. So that's it for today. I hope the rest of the day is good to you and have a great weekend.